Okay guys, this is Maxim at MaksWerks.com. Today's review is going to be on the Kawasaki Vulcan 900, and I want you to pay real close attention to the bike, especially to the bike's frame and motor as I kind of walk around it to give you an idea, and I'm going to talk about why that's important later. But this is basically Kawasaki's middleweight cruiser bike. There's bigger 1100, 1700, and maybe even 2200 cc bikes, and then there's a smaller 800, 750 at one point, and internationally there's even little tiny baby Vulcans that are like 125s and such. So this specific model is a 2008 Kawasaki Vulcan 900 custom, and it's going to be a big V-twin fuel injected. You can kind of see the dash right here before I even take off. Everything is super minimalistic. Like, you have this mode button that really just changes the time to the odometer to the single trip counter, and you're done. You have a little fuel gauge, you have a speedometer, and you have no tach. And then you have a reset button. You have neutral, turn, and high beam, which is required by law, I think. And that's really it. And the cool thing is, all the electronics on this bike, except for the battery obviously, are located pretty much right here in the middle underneath the gas tank. So we're gonna set off here and talk a little about the bike. So technical specs on the bike. Let's see, I got a 903cc V-twin, fuel injected, water cooled, pretty much all standard there. You got the intake and the exhaust both coming on the right hand side here. As you saw, it's got nice, clean, smooth sloping lines. You got a single front disc brake on this model on the right hand side. It's got a 4-piston caliper on it, and you got a big 4-piston caliper in the back of the bike. They're basically actually the same. They're actually pretty much the exact same caliper, front and rear. And this bike really relies on its rear brake. It's an excellent rear brake. It does a really good job of slowing you down. And this is the custom model, which means that I have 180 instead of 160 rear. I have a 21-inch front wheel, and I have these drag style bars, which are actually quite nice, and I quite like them. But that's kind of it for the technical specs. So it's a belt drive bike, which I'm not a huge fan of, but there's nothing really wrong with. Everything works. It's a great bike. I picked it up from a guy that was moving and basically needed a little quick cash. Haven't really had any issues with it. Doesn't really vibrate very much, except when you get going real quick, and I'll talk about that in a minute. You got a 5-speed gearbox. Clicks through the gears. You really want to use the clutch. It's a big clanky gearbox. You don't want to just shift it without the clutch. And there's no tach on this bike, and I'm pretty sure there's 2 reasons for that. 1, a tach costs more money than no tach, and 2, it wouldn't really matter. This bike has an idle speed of like 900 or something like that, 900 1,000 normally, and I think it makes peak power, and I think peak power is probably close to about 60, give or take. And that peak power is made at like 3,000 RPM. And if you try to rev this bike up, it doesn't like it. It starts shaking, it starts bucking, it starts telling you that revving is really not what it does. What it does is cruise. Right now, we're in like 3rd gear going 50 miles an hour. It's great. 1st gear is pretty much exclusively reserved for pulling stumps, and then the other 4 gears are really kind of spread out loosey-goosey like, so that you can just kind of cruise at any speed, pretty much. So that's kind of the technical end of this bike. It's got a real low seat height, got a battery under the seat. But the important thing was, when I mentioned earlier, to take a real close look at the bike while I was walking around it. And the reason for that was, this bike is deceptively big and deceptively heavy. And when you look at it, it looks like a huge bike, but really it's got a very skinny steel tube backbone, and all of this stuff is basically just hanging off of it. The motor has a crap ton of chrome on it, and it's really not anywhere near as big as it seems. Like, the spark plugs sit like a good 2 inches into the chrome, because the actual motor is in there somewhere, but it's not nearly as big as they kind of make it out to be. And what I'm going to do is because this is, again, a cruiser bike, we're going to go up here a little bit, and then I'm going to get on the highway. But here, if we put it in neutral and just take a look at the bike, you know, there's a lot of chrome, you got your air cooled up front, you got your pegs, got your rear brake, got your air filter in here. On this bike, I've gone through it, so it's got fresh brake fluid, oil change. I put in a K&N air filter because the stock one was just completely clogged up. It looked like it was maybe the original one. It's had it for 16,000 miles. The air filter really did a pretty decent job of picking the bike up a little bit, but with the stock exhaust on here and the stock tune, it's not doing a whole lot for you. But just take a moment here, and I'm going to rev this bike out. And there we are, kind of basically maxing it out at top RPM. And the bike's really not too happy. It's really, I don't know if you can tell on the camera or not, but it's actually really shaking pretty hard. And it's just not real thrilled with being revved out to whatever that was, like 5 or 6 grand at the red line. And so you don't do it, and the truth is, it doesn't really pull all that hard up there. It really likes to stay in its, you know, 1,000 to 3,500 RPM range. And the only time that really becomes an issue is because of the way this bike is geared. Once you get past about 70 on the highway, 75 maybe, the bike really starts shaking and bucking and not being real happy, because you've basically run out of gears. And from what I understand, this one is a custom, so it might be geared slightly differently in the rear end. And because it's a belt drive, replacing the rear sprocket, if you will, belt sprocket, or pulley or whatever they're called, is really not a trivial task, because you can't find it. Like, if you have a change-driven bike, I can go online and find any sprocket in any bolt configuration of any size pretty much for any bike. You know, it's just a matter of doing a basic Google search. However, stuff like this, there's not a whole lot of manufacturers that put up a lot of custom parts for a bike like a Kawasaki Vulcan. And there we go, I basically braked to 15 miles an hour and just pulled out of there in third like it was nothing, because it is. The bike makes, you know, 60 or 65 pound-feet of torque basically from redline. I'm sorry, from idle. It makes pretty much full torque from idle, and it's really kind of, it's actually kind of fun for a big goofy bike with all this plastic and chrome bolted onto it and not a very powerful motor. It's usually not the sort of thing I go for, but at the same time, this bike brings a smile to my face, which I think is one of its big selling points, which is why they sell so goddamn many of these things, is because even though it's fairly cheap and fairly slow and really not exciting to drive in any way, it's fun. It's a big fun cruiser bike. I can sit in this seat for hours. I've been looking for houses lately. I've been rolling around looking at a lot of properties, and I almost always take this thing. And I don't really know why, but when I go into my garage and I'm like, well, I can jump on the Speed Triple or the Virago or the Vulcan, I almost always go straight to the Vulcan. Now, if I want to go out and have fun or whatever, I'll take the S3, but if I'm doing a grocery store run or I'm going to go look at a house or something, I always grab this bike because it's fast enough and quick enough to be safe in traffic without having crazy awe-inspiring speed. But here's what I want to talk about. We're up in top gear and I'm merging onto I-35 here, and there's 70 and there's 75, and I don't know if the video can see it, but if you kind of look in the mirror right here, it's buzzing like crazy, and so is the other one. And the reason for that is because the whole front end is buzzing like crazy, because the whole bike is buzzing like crazy. you know, and it's really not that happy. Like once we get down to 70, there's almost no vibration. It's totally in its groove here at 70 miles an hour, and I can sit like this literally for hours on end without any sort of discomfort. You know, the front pegs, they're front mounted pegs, but they're exactly the right distance, at least for my frame, and the handlebars are in a good spot. I don't feel a lot of stress on my back. The seat is very cushy. So all in all, it's just like, as long as you're going about 70 or less in top gear, you are the happiest camper in the world. But as you start to kind of wind it out, it's really buzzy, really buzzy, really buzzy, really buzzy front end, and I really don't like that. So let's talk a little bit about handling dynamics. I'm gonna get off the highway here and find some smaller roads so we can talk about handling dynamics. So this bike has got a standard fork, as you can see right there. I don't know, it's probably like 38 millimeter, maybe even 40 millimeter. You got a shock on the back, and everything's non-adjustable. I mean, preload's adjustable if you open up the forks, but other than that, everything is non-adjustable. It's a real bargain bin. You know, this bike is a 2008, and the only thing that lets you know it's a 2008 is the fact that it's got fuel injection instead of carburetors. But you know, it's still fun. It's a fun cruiser bike. You hop on it and it feels like Sons of Anarchy type shit rolling around, and it's great for that kind of stuff. And it's, you know, this bike has a stock exhaust, so it's not very loud. We just roll along, and there's not really a whole lot of issue with anything really. And like that, I just merged up the highway, so now I went from going 70 to going about 50, and I'm still in top gear, and I still got plenty of passing power if I just crank on the throttle. And I've actually put quite a few miles on this bike, and there's some more police. I put quite a few miles on this bike, probably at least about 300 miles since I got it, and it constantly returns about 42 miles to the gallon, at least the way I ride. And that's really pretty sufficient for a 900cc V-twin cruiser bike. So now that we're off the highway, I'm gonna go left up here, but let's talk about handling dynamics. So because this is the custom model, we have a 21-inch front wheel, which is big. It's really pretty big, and it's meant to follow this latest trend of, and there we are again in third gear, and it just, from basically zero, it just pulls. I don't even bother downshifting any further. And as you can see, you can just really roll onto it in the corners, and it pulls you right through. The back tire is a little worn down, which is why I'm not going 100% on it, just kind of gently riding it around. And plus, this bike doesn't really encourage you to ever give 100%. It's not really interested in 100%. It's really more interested in like 60%. It's like, oh, we're gonna do about 60%. That sounds pretty comfy. You know, it's like having a beer on the couch kind of bike, not a barnstormer kind of bike. And you know, anyway, back to handling. So a lot of people always wonder, it's like the 21-inch front wheel, yeah, it looks great, but it probably like makes handling and ride quality kind of suck, which in a lot of cases it does. But Kawasaki's really tuned the suspension quite well for being a bargain bin parts. And while the 21-inch front wheel, when you're basically sitting in a parking lot, the bike always wants to tilt over on its side. It basically wants to smack the handlebar down. When you're moving it around the garage, like not under its own power, you're just trying to move it without actually sitting on the bike, it can be a bit of a pain. But when you're out here on the road and you're actually moving along pretty quickly, you don't really feel it. The suspension absorbs bumps like it should. The rear ends are very controlled, and so is the front end. There's not a lot of jumping around. It's not harsh by any means. And it doesn't really impede handling in any way I can tell. And remember, this is a big cruising bike. It's not meant to tear up, you know, the Dragon's Tail or whatever. It's meant to go down the highway. It's meant to go to Walmart. It's meant to go pick up your kid after Sunday's baseball game or whatever. You know, it's not meant to impress. It's meant to impress in a parking lot, not on a racetrack. And it does. It's big and red and shiny, and I polished it, and now it's even bigger and redder and shinier. And you know, it's a cool, awesome bike, and it brings a smile to my face. And you know, we can sit and talk about, you know, basically various parameters. You know, we can talk about displacement and horsepower and torque and wheelbase and suspension and blah 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 blah. But at the end of the day, with a motorcycle, 9 times out of 10 you have that kind of intangible factor that really plays the biggest difference in whether it's a good bike or an okay bike or a bad bike. Like if you watch the blog, I did a review of the Yamaha Virago, and I kept saying it's not a bad bike, and it's not. But it doesn't really have that interest factor, that wow factor, that I want to hop on and ride factor. It mostly is just a motorcycle, and it behaves like just a motorcycle, and you can't really complain because that's what it's supposed to do, because it's just a motorcycle. This bike, on the other hand, is more than just a motorcycle. It's a cruiser. It's freedom. It's, you know, whatever you want to call it. And I know that that's, you know, I know that that is a really hard thing to qualify. And you know, at first look, you look at this bike and think, oh, Kawasaki slapped something together for the American market that's basically made up of the cheapest cruiser parts they could find, chrome, big paint, and that's about it, and a big front wheel. And you wouldn't be wrong. You'd just be an asshole, because once you throw a leg over this bike, just because you're sitting so low in it, and the stretch to the front pegs, and just the way that it always has torque. That's the thing. Like, you know, it doesn't have mind-boggling torque. It just always has it. You know, it's like when you hop on a leader bike, sports bike, the first time, and you're putting around the parking lot, and you think, huh, this isn't really all that impressive. And then you get on the highway and you get up in 4th gear or something, and you open the throttle for half a second, and then you look down, you're doing 120 miles an hour in a 60, and you're like, okay, this is really actually pretty fucking impressive. I don't even know how I got going this fast. This bike is nothing like that. This bike is like, it's like your comfort blanket. It's like your favorite food. It's just there all the time, letting you know that, listen, no matter what, I'm here for you. I will always be here for you. You know, no matter how many miles you and I put together, I will keep you safe and I will keep you happy. And it's awesome. Like, there's just no other real way of, actually I'm gonna go over here. There's no other real way of me describing it other than it's just an awesome bike. It just does a really good job of being a motorcycle, more so than you would imagine, than you think, than you'd really want to give it credit for, but it does, and I can't really explain that. I mean, Kawasaki makes these Vulcans all around the world, and like I was saying earlier, you can, I believe in India, you can buy a Vulcan 125, and then here in America, you can buy, it varies year to year. I know that from the late 90s to the early or mid 2000s, you could buy a 750 and then an 800, and then I think now the bottom line one is this one, which is the 900, and then they make like an 1100, and then I think they even make like a 2000 or a 2200 cc cruiser that's a Vulcan, maybe a 1400 as well. But I haven't ridden those models, and yeah, they're gonna make more power than this guy, but this bike is what I would say is just enough. it puts a smile on my face. You know, I would say that it's a great starter bike. It's a great rider's bike. I mean, you could be the best rider in the world and still have a blast on this bike, just sitting back and cruising and enjoying yourself. And it's just the little things that make you feel like a badass. You know, that huge 21-inch wheel. Do you really need that? No, but it makes you feel like a badass. The ignition that's under my left leg down there next to the rear cylinder. Why does the ignition need to be down there? Why isn't it up on the triple like it is on every other motorcycle? Why? Because custom, because badass, because coming from the factory. You know, I would say that as far as cruiser bikes go, it even has the best looking stock exhaust. It looks like two huge pipes, and until you look at the very, very back, you can see that they're actually just mufflers, but it looks like two huge straight pipes just sitting there in the parking lot with all the chrome glistening. And, you know, and you pull up and ask people, you say, how big do you think this engine is? And they look at it and it's huge and chrome and shiny, and they tell you like, it's 1,500 at least, maybe even 2,000. And you're just like, 2,000? Man, this is a little 900. And they're like, what? How? Like, basically, Kawasaki managed to take up as much space with as little displacement as possible, which generally I would be here, you know, talking trash about and saying, wow, this is stupid, blah, 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 blah. But for this bike, it works. I mean, just look at it. It's so comfortable. It's so smooth. It doesn't... I think the truth about this bike is that it doesn't ever pretend to be anything that it's not. It strictly exists as a base level cruiser bike, and it doesn't try to do anything. It doesn't try to be the sportiest cruiser bike. It doesn't try to be the roomiest cruiser bike. It doesn't try to be the most agile cruiser bike. It doesn't try to win any sort of record from anybody. All that it really tries to do is just be a good cruiser bike, and that's what it is. You know, it's just an excellent motorcycle. But anyway, we are heading back to the house here, and as you've seen, this is an excellent bike, and I really like it. It is for sale on www.MaksWerks.com, as are all the bikes that we test. But this will be one bike I'll be sad to see go. So if you want more information, technical specs, a little bit more in-depth review of the various technical accolades of this motorcycle, please take a look in the description of the video. Go read my blog. There's all kinds of useful information in it that isn't really anywhere else. And I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. That hopefully the next bike I'm going to review is I'm going to take some time and review my Triumph Speed Triple, which is a fairly customized bike, which is why I've been kind of hesitant on reviewing it, because and you can see I'm being an asshole. This is not good. I did not mean to do that. I wasn't paying attention to talking to the camera. Didn't want to cut that guy off, but that's what happened. Anyway, I'm going to review the Triumph Speed Triple next. Probably the next couple of days. There'll be a blog post up on it. If you like this video, if you like my other videos, please subscribe. There's all kinds of fun stuff coming here in the near future. So make sure you click the subscribe button and keep an eye out going forward and all the cool stuff that's been going on. And thanks for watching, guys, and ride safe.